The topic of our group presentation is the Battle of Britain. Let's set the stage. It is July 1940, and Hitler has been unstoppable in his advances across Western Europe. But Britain refuses to capitulate to Germany. It stands as the sole deterrent to the Nazi goal of taking over Europe. Hitler saw Britain as Germany's primary enemy. He ordered preparations for Operation Sea Lion, the invasion of Britain. But before the amphibious assault, the British air defenses had to be neutralized. Hence, the aerial Battle of Britain. Germany's goal was to establish air superiority over England. Hermann Goering, chief of the Luftwaffe, ordered Eagle Day to commence on August 13th. Their targets were Royal Air Force airfields and aircraft factories in southeastern England. The Luftwaffe bombers required fighter support as they flew over Britain. The best fighter available at the time was the Messerschmitt Bf 109. It was a superior aircraft to the Hawker Hurricane and very comparable to the Supermarine Spitfire, but it lacked sufficient range to effectively execute continued combat over Britain. The average time over the combat zone was only 10 minutes. The Germans tried to make up the difference by utilizing the Messerschmitt Bf 110, a heavy fighter, as close escort for heavy bombers like the Heinkel He 111. The Bf 110 lacked agility, and this was exploited by the Spitfires and Hurricanes. Without significant fighter escort, the bombers were easy targets for the RAF. This led to exceptionally high losses for the Luftwaffe and ultimately victory for the British. As the battle raged on, losses to the Luftwaffe were becoming unacceptably high. The limited range of the fighters and poor agility of the bombers were contributing factors, as was the effectiveness of the British to locate and destroy them with the Dowding system. The Dowding system was an interception network that integrated ground-based chain radar and relayed that information to plotters, who would then chart actual aircraft movements. RAF commanders could use that information to orchestrate Britain's aerial defense. The early detection capability and rapid dissemination of enemy aircraft locations increased the RAF fighter force's effectiveness. During daytime attacks, RAF Spitfires, Hurricane fighters, and effective radar made German losses too high to continue. When the Luftwaffe switched to nighttime bombings, they became very inaccurate, doing little damage to the military or the economic targets they were seeking, and having little effect on the British war effort. In addition to the RAF, the Royal Navy was standing in the way of a German invasion of Britain. During the invasion of Norway in April 1940, Germany had lost an entire flotilla of new ships to the Royal Navy. By the planned time for Operation Sea Lion, they didn't have the naval power needed to carry and support troops in a cross-channel invasion. On September 17, 1940, Operation Sea Lion was officially called off, as Germany turned its primary attention toward the invasion of the Soviet Union. Although the amphibious invasion was canceled, the bombings over England continued. In early September 1940, the Luftwaffe shifted their targets from Royal Air Force airfields to British cities. This change was in retaliation for a British night bombing of Berlin in late August. Germany's bombing of cities, as opposed to military sites, was a new strategy aimed to see if civilian unrest could force Churchill to the bargaining table. This switch in strategy also gave the RAF time to rebuild their damaged airfields and radar stations to become more effective at destroying the Luftwaffe. Germany began night raids on British cities, which the RAF had difficulty repelling. With low visibility, the German bombs often missed their marks, But even so, it began 9 months of terror on the British citizens, a time that became known as the Blitz. London was the first target of the night air raids and suffered 57 consecutive nights of bombings. The Germans bombed other cities as well, including Liverpool, Birmingham, and Coventry, just to name a few. The raids were devastating to the British civilians living in the cities. It was a time of uncertainty and terror, but it was a threat that Britain had prepared to endure. In preparation for an assumed eventual aerial bombing, the air raid precaution system had been established by Britain back in 1937 to alert civilians when to seek shelter. Citywide blackouts were enforced, and people covered their windows with blackout materials, wore white stripes when walking outside at night, and affixed white paint to the sidewalks in an attempt to prevent motor accidents. People with gardens were encouraged to build their own bomb shelters or purchase an indoor cage to protect them from falling debris. Many found communal sheltering in the underground and other venues. Even with protective measures in place, there was much loss of life, injuries, and destruction of property from the Luftwaffe bombing raids. An estimated 23,000 civilians died in the 6-month period between June and December of 1940. Whole sections of cities were reduced to rubble. The concern for protecting British children from German attacks had already led to their evacuation as early as September of 1939, following the Nazi invasion of Poland. Although parents were sad over missing their children, they also knew that they would be safer in the rural areas, and this knowledge helped with the morale. Prime Minister Winston Churchill managed to keep the British spirits high with his inspiring radio broadcasts. "London can take it" slogans appeared and helped rally the Brits to confidence. Churchill's famous V for victory hand gesture ensured the British that England would not fail the test. The Battle of Britain was the first major campaign to be decided strictly by air. Hitler made a strategic error in mid-campaign by changing the primary target from British airfields and aircraft to British cities. This switch in strategy gave the RAF time to rebuild the damaged airfields and radar stations to become more effective at destroying the Luftwaffe. German air forces suffered significant losses, especially during the daytime raids over Britain. Bombing inaccuracy resulted in only partial success in hitting the designated targets. Britain also proved to the United States that she was a strong ally, one that wouldn't fold to German pressures. While Germany would continue to bomb Britain, they never again held any serious plans to invade.